Okay, so you have probably heard the term fintech before, and so it's a new term, but I'll be doing this video to break down to you the different types of fintechs that exist in Kenya, particularly from a market perspective and also a legal perspective, and the different types of regulations that relate to them. Because I know for fintechs, regulation is usually a very big aspect of the operation. So I'll talk about them broadly and just you can do it like a fintech 101 in a sense. So there are a variety of fintechs that are operational in Kenya that offer services to different types of people in the financial sector. So I'd start with maybe the most common ones that we know a bit more about, the digital lending fintech. So they are called digital credit providers in a lending perspective, and they are fintechs that facilitate the disbursement of loans to individuals. So people are able to borrow and get loans from the particular fintech when they need them. So there are a lot of them are mobile based. So they are a common type of fintech. They are called digital credit providers, DCPs. Under DCPs also there are other related products that are not specifically lending products but are related to digital lending. So these ones are called BNPL. A BNPL is called a buy now, pay later solution. So a buy now, pay later solution is a type of arrangement where someone buys something, usually a piece of equipment or a household commodity, like a fridge, and then they're able to repay it in installments or in certain monthly installments. And now the person offering the BNPL solution gets paid in terms of some interest that accrues during that, some interest rates that accrue as a result of that. So in terms of regulation, so the regulation wise, they are regulated by the Central Bank of Kenya primarily, and they are required to get a license to operate as a digital credit provider. Yeah, and in terms of getting the license, what the central bank usually needs is them to have the requisite legal documentation, to have registered the appropriate legal structures as a company, to have a clear chain of ownership so that we know who owns these DCPs, to have a clear channel or rather clear explanation of where they're sourcing the funds so that the provider is not a conduit for money laundering and whatnot. So that is usually some of the things that they look at. And then also the amount of money that you want to inject in the digital credit provider, your policies, whether you're registered with the data commissioner, and some of those things that usually take. So as standard, maybe getting a DCP license standard in Kenya may take around 9 months thereabouts. Let's say 9 months, 10 months thereabouts if you're calculating the bit of the process. But it can take shorter. But from experience, that's the kind of period that you're looking at if you're trying to register it. But it's definitely a model to think around. The other entity that the other common type of fintech, and I also touch on it and the kind of regulation it's afforded. It's called a payment service provider. So a payment service provider is the one that's a bit more complex and people may not really understand it. But a payment service provider, there are a variety of them, but the key ones are they're used for collections and digital payments. So payments, of course, now before M-Pesa, people used to pay a lot of things by cash, but nowadays a lot of payments are done by digital platforms and whatnot. So if you're going online and you're booking a movie ticket and you're paying online, a lot of times that money is collected. You can be paying by M-Pesa, but the person issuing it is collecting it through a payment agent, so a payment service provider called, I think common one is PesaPal for some, and I know DPO Pay also does a bit on that. So they do collections for the site, for the person now selling you the movie tickets, and you pay through them, and they're able to balance the finances on their end. So they're called payment service providers. Those are the common ones. Also beyond that, M-Pesa is also a payment service provider, but it's a bigger one. So I wanted to talk about the smaller contextualized ones. So there are those ones, and then there are some that are detailed and target particular industries, and they just offer collections maybe for betting sites and for whatnot. So they are also payment service providers. Regulation for payment service provider, rather how they're regulated, they are also regulated by the Central Bank of Kenya, and there's a law also that governs that. And maybe some of the key things that you need as well. The key thing is the core capital. One of the core thing is the core capital. For majority of them, it's 5 million, but it can go slightly higher or lower depending on the specific types of products that you're offering. That's called a payment service provider. The other thing, the requirements, of course, like the DCP, the requirements on ownership, clear lines of explanation of who owns this entity, clear explanations of where the money is coming from, clear legal documentation, clear proper legal structuring if it's a company or whatever format. So they are usually key to getting the to get to what's the process like to get acquiring a license to operate. As one, if you're talking about timelines, you're thinking around, depending on the time, depending on the complexity of the product, can be 6 months, sometimes can take 2 years, even more depending on the complexity of the the product. And it's important to note that it is usually handled on a case-to-case basis. So each fintech depending on the product each fintech has. The other closely related one that I'd want to touch on as I also wind up on this session, they're called a money remittance provider. So they're a bit like a payments platform, but the key difference between a money remittance provider and a payment service provider is that a payment service provider stores value in wallets. So they store okay, let me just back up a bit. So what a money remittance provider is, it's an entity that allows you to send money from one person to another person, and primarily also, or rather sometimes also from one country to another. But the primary thing that it does remittance payment. It allows you to remit a payment or send money to someone else. So it's not so much, it's not used for collections and it's not used for booking tickets and whatnot in payments in that sense. It's purely used for remittance. Now back to what I was saying. So in terms of the difference between a money remittance provider and a payment service provider, one of the key differences is money remittance provider doesn't have wallets, so it doesn't store money, it just transmits. If you get what I mean. So a payment service provider, sometimes, for example, M-Pesa is a good example because it serves as both. So there's M-Pesa as the remittance provider, and there's M-Pesa as a payments company. So M-Pesa, the payments company, is what allows you to have an M-Pesa wallet, and you're able to store your money there for a bit of time. But the remittance aspect of it just allows you to send money without storing, per se. So that may give you a bit of context to it, but that's a key difference. Payment service providers store value in wallets, and they can store it for a bit of time, but remittance is just purely used to send and receive money. Yeah. So also maybe closely related are forex, forex bureaus that also closely relate to money remittance providers, but I don't want to go to them in depth through this video. So this is just a primer for you to give a bit of to understand this. Maybe you've had the payment service provider before, maybe you've had a digital credit provider before, maybe you've had a money remittance provider before. Also, money remittance providers are usually called sometimes MROs, which are money remittance operators. So they more or less mean the same. If you go to another country, payment service providers may be called payment institutions, and that's another context. So DCPs are also called digital lenders. So this is just to give you a bit of context and understanding of the key. This is not all of fintech, because we'll do another video discussing other savings products and how they're regulated by the Capital Markets Authority. But for the sake of this video, I'm talking about these three, and to just give you a bit of an understanding of what they are and what they entail, and how they and what you require to be able to come into them. Maybe before I close, the final thing for money remittance providers, they have a higher. There also another difference between them and payments. They have a higher core capital requirement, so you need to have 20 million shillings. That's around estimate 20,000 USD to be able to operate it, as compared to a payments company that usually requires around between 1 million and 5 million for majority of them for you to be able to operate. That's between, I think, 10,000 and around 50,000 USD. So thank you for that. I think I've given you a bit of context. My name is Meshach Masibo. I am a lawyer who specializes in offering legal services to people or companies in technology. And yeah, if you have any question around these things, or you want also to comment or to give your alternative view, feel free to drop a comment or feedback. Thank you.